When your dog brings home a bear and refuses to let go, everyone thinks it's a mistake. But in the vast expanse of Montana's wilderness, where the Rocky Mountains rise like ancient sentinels beneath an endless sky, the Elk Ridge Valley offers a different kind of truth. Here, where morning mist clings to pine-covered slopes and evening light paints the peaks in gold and crimson, time moves with the pace of seasons, not the frantic urgency of modern life. The valley stretches out in every direction, a natural amphitheater carved by glaciers and shaped by storms. Its only sounds are the wind whispering through evergreens and the distant cries of eagles soaring on thermal updrafts. It was in this stone and sky cathedral that Sam Winters made his final stand against time. At 65, Sam carried himself with the dignity of a man who had seen too much darkness and had finally chosen light. His hands, calloused and scarred from military tours and long years of farming, moved with the care of someone who knew every task mattered. His pale blue eyes, like a winter sky, held stories of pain and beauty, of hollowing losses and quiet grace. The merino wool farm he had built with his late wife Laura was more than a livelihood. It was a legacy of love and perseverance in a world that often pulled things apart. The rolling pastures, fenced by rails Sam built himself, provided grazing for 200 sheep, whose rich wool was prized throughout the region. The farmhouse, made from fieldstone and local timber, sat like a warm embrace on the hillside. Its porch wrapped around the home and offered a view that seemed to stretch forever. But since Laura's death 3 years earlier, the farm had grown quiet. Laughter from the kitchen was gone, replaced by Sam's steady routines, the sound of boots on old wood, the hum of barn machinery, the soft murmur of his voice to the animals that had become his closest companions. It wasn't an oppressive silence, but a weighted one, like the pause between notes in a melody. And through it all, Duke remained his constant. The German Shepherd, forged in 22 years of shared military service, was more than a dog. He had followed Sam through deserts and jungles, through war zones and silent nights. Duke was a soldier, a brother, and a protector. Now in retirement, he brought the same discipline to his life on the farm, patrolling the fence lines each evening, with practiced precision. October arrived in Montana like a soft warning. The beauty of winter was close now. On the morning of the 12th, Sam awoke to a transformed world. The season's first heavy snow had fallen overnight, blanketing the land, in white that sparkled under the rising sun. The air rang cold and clear, so quiet that even his heartbeat seemed to echo. His morning ritual was unchanged. Strong black coffee at the kitchen window, watching sunlight chase shadows from the snowy hills. Normally, Duke would be visible out among the flock, his dark form moving with purpose through the sheep. But today, he was nowhere in sight. The knot of unease that formed in Sam's gut was a feeling he had learned long ago never to dismiss. Duke didn't break routine. His movements were as reliable as the sunrise. If something was off, it meant something was wrong. Sam set his coffee aside, grabbed his coat, and stepped out into the snow. It was ankle-deep and untouched except for one clear trail, Duke's paw prints leading from the barn toward the tree line. Sam followed, heart tight, noting Duke's stride looked normal. No limp, no distress, just a direct, deliberate path into the woods. The tracks moved past a frozen water trough and toward a dense stand of lodgepole pine and Douglas fir that marked the edge of the deep wilderness. As Sam neared the trees, a soft, broken sound cut through the stillness, a low whimper that froze. His blood. It wasn't Duke, it was something else, something in pain. Quickening his pace, Sam pushed through the forest, breath-forming clouds in the cold. About 50 yards in, he found Duke standing completely still beside a fallen pine tree. The trunk had collapsed across a cluster of granite boulders, creating a natural shelter. Duke's stance was strange, alert but calm, protective without aggression. His ears were pricked forward, his tail low but not tucked. When Sam reached him, Duke turned his head briefly in greeting, then looked back at the hollow under the tree. That's when Sam saw it. Curled tightly into the shelter, A small black bear cub, maybe 6 months old, trembled violently. Blood darkened the snow under its hind leg. But it wasn't just the injury that caught Sam's breath. It was the faint ringed scar around the cub's neck, a band of raised tissue visible beneath the fur. A mark of restraint, captivity, abuse. Sam had seen such scars before, overseas in regions ravaged by wildlife trafficking. This cub was no wild orphan. It was an escapee, a survivor. And when the cub's eyes met his, Sam saw not fear or rage, but a deep, exhausted wariness. The fire, kind of guarded, knowing only a creature hurt by people could carry. Duke, incredibly, showed no hostility. Instead, he lowered himself beside the cub slowly, deliberately. His body language soft, his eyes gentle. It was empathy, plain and unshakable. A moment that defied everything Sam believed about predator and prey. As the snow whispered around them, Sam stood still, absorbing it all. His soldier's instincts screamed caution. This was a wild animal, dangerous, illegal to shelter. And yet, something stirred inside him. Something he hadn't felt since Laura died. Purpose. Moving slowly, he shrugged off his heavy coat and knelt beside the tree. The cub tensed, but Duke's steady presence calmed it. Sam wrapped the coat around the trembling body, surprised by how light it felt. The wound was deep, probably a metal trap or barbed wire, and the blood loss told him time was short. He lifted the cub carefully, cradling it like the injured soldiers he had once carried from war zones. Step by step, he retraced his path through the snow, Duke walking beside him, half on alert, half focused on the cub. As they neared the pasture, the sheep scattered in instinctive fear, their eyes wide at the sight of the bear. But Sam didn't slow. The barn was close now. The building, designed by Sam and Laura 15 years earlier, was more than practical. It was purposeful. Spacious enough for animals, tools, and supplies. It was also stocked with everything a soldier-turned-farmer might need: emergency lighting, medical gear, and communications that worked no matter what. In the warm southwest corner, near a propane heater, Sam created a space for healing. Sam created a makeshift sanctuary for his unexpected patient. Using bales of hay, he constructed a protective enclosure and covered the floor with clean straw, fashioning a recovery area that offered both security and comfort while allowing him to monitor the cub's condition. He set the propane heater to its lowest setting, providing gentle warmth without overwhelming the animal, one more accustomed to outdoor temperatures. A shallow pan of fresh water and a small dish of honey, the only bear-appropriate food immediately available, completed. The basic necessities. Cleaning and treating the cub's wound required all of Sam's field medical training, and a significant portion of the veterinary supplies he kept for his sheep. The laceration was deep but clean, suggesting it had been caused by a sharp implement, rather than the jagged tear of an animal attack. Sam flushed the wound with sterile saline, applied antibiotic ointment to ward off infection, and wrapped the leg carefully with gauze and medical tape. Throughout the procedure, the cub remained remarkably still, almost as if she understood that Sam's actions were meant to help, not harm. It was during this careful tending that Sam spoke aloud for the first time since entering the barn. "Easy, little one," he murmured, his voice bearing the same quiet authority he had once used to calm wounded soldiers. "You're safe now. Nobody's going to hurt you here." The cub's ears twitched at his voice, and for a moment, her breathing slowed and deepened, as if his words carried a healing power of their own. Once the immediate medical needs had been addressed, Sam found himself studying the small creature who had entered his life so dramatically. Despite her youth and vulnerability, there was something in her bearing that hinted at resilience and intelligence. Her coat, though matted and dirty from her ordeal, was thick and healthy, indicating she'd been well nourished before her captivity. Her eyes, while wary, held none of the vacant, broken look so often seen in animals subjected to prolonged abuse. "Willow," Sam said suddenly, the name rising from some deep reservoir of memory. He recalled the willow trees beside the creek on his childhood farm in Wisconsin, trees that bent but never broke, no matter how fierce the wind. It felt right for this young creature who had survived captivity and injury, yet still retained the wild spark in her eyes. In the days that followed, Sam developed a routine that accommodated his new responsibility while maintaining the essential operations of the farm. Each morning, he would check on Willow before beginning his other chores, bringing fresh water and small portions of food, berries, nuts, and the occasional fish from the stream that ran through his land. Her appetite was poor at first, but gradually improved as her strength returned and her trust in Sam deepened. Perhaps the most remarkable development during this time was Duke's behavior. Rather than viewing Willow as an intruder or threat, the German Shepherd seemed to adopt her as his charge. He would lie for hours beside the makeshift enclosure, his presence clearly comforting the cub. When Willow whimpered at night, likely from nightmares or phantom pain, Duke would respond with soft whines, a form of interspecies communication that transcended the normal boundaries between predator and domestic animal. The breakthrough came on the 8th day. Sam was refilling Willow's water dish when he noticed she was no longer cowering in the far corner of her enclosure. Instead, she had moved toward the fence that separated her from Duke. As Sam watched, she extended her small black nose toward the wire mesh. Duke, with infinite gentleness, touched his own nose to hers through the barrier. It was a moment that bridged not just the physical space between them, but also the immense evolutionary distance between wild and domestic, predator and protector. From then on, their relationship took on an almost mystical quality. Willow began to mirror Duke's behavior, watching him patrol the property, copying his alert postures and protective stances. When Sam entered the enclosure to change bedding or check on her wound, she no longer moved toward the exit, but instead approached Duke, seeking his presence for reassurance. By the end of October, Willow's physical recovery was nearly complete. Her wound had healed cleanly, leaving only a small scar, and her strength had returned. Sam knew that continued confinement was no longer necessary. What he didn't know was whether Willow would choose to return to the wilderness or remain on the farm, where she had found safety and companionship. The answer came on a crisp morning when Sam deliberately left the enclosure door open while tending to other chores. When he returned an hour later, he expected to find Willow gone, vanished into the forest. Instead, she was lying peacefully beside Duke in a patch of sunlight near the barn, both animals watching the sheep with the focus of seasoned guardians. It was a sight that defied everything Sam had learned about wildlife behavior. A bear cub, fully capable of surviving on her own, had chosen to stay with a domestic dog and an elderly man, instead of returning to the wild. Even more astonishing, the sheep, whose survival depended on detecting and fleeing from predators, had accepted Willow's presence with minimal signs of distress. Over the following weeks, this unlikely arrangement evolved into something resembling a functional family unit. Willow followed Duke on his rounds, learned the boundaries of the property, and adapted to the rhythms of farm life. She showed no interest in hunting or disrupting the sheep. Instead, she appeared to understand her role as part of a protective system, using her sharp senses and growing strength to contribute to the farm's security. Sam began documenting the behavior in a journal, partly from scientific interest, but also from a sense that he was witnessing something that needed to be remembered. His notes revealed a pattern of learning and adaptation that challenged conventional beliefs about integrating wild animals into human environments. That peaceful balance was disrupted on a cold November morning when Wade Conley, a forest ranger with the Montana Department of Fish, Wildlife and Parks, arrived at the farm. Wade, a serious man in his 40s, had received multiple reports of unusual bear activity in the area. Sam met him at the gate, hoping to prevent complications. But just as the two men exchanged greetings, Duke and Willow appeared from behind the barn. Wade's reaction was swift. His hand went to his radio as he stared in disbelief at the sight of a bear cub walking calmly beside a German Shepherd. Both animals were relaxed, showing no signs of stress or fear. "Mr. Winters," Wade said carefully, "I need you to explain why there's a bear cub on your property that appears to be domesticated." Sam had prepared for this moment, but facing it in reality was harder than he'd expected. "She's not domesticated," he said cautiously. "She's here by choice. I found her injured, treated her, and she decided to stay." Wade's expression hardened, clearly unsure whether he was dealing with someone naive or deceptive. "Mr. Winters, by law, any contact with wild animals, especially bears, must be reported. Harboring a wild animal without proper permits is a federal offense. The bear needs to be removed immediately and evaluated at a wildlife facility." It was then that Duke stepped forward, positioning himself between the two men. His movement was deliberate, not aggressive but unmistakably protective. He was guarding something he valued deeply, something more important than rules or protocol. Willow, responding to Duke's cue, moved to Sam's side, her eyes fixed on Wade with quiet, watchful intelligence. Sam looked down at his two companions and felt something shift inside him, a clarity that had been building since the day he found Willow in the woods. "She's not being kept," he said softly. "She stays because she wants to, just like I chose, to stay on this land when I could have moved somewhere easier. Sometimes the heart knows things the law doesn't." The standoff that followed might have led to Willow's immediate removal, if not for a phone call Sam made that evening to his son James in Denver. James, a wildlife biologist at the Colorado Wildlife Conservation Center, had built a reputation for his work in animal behavior and rehabilitation. When Sam explained the situation, James's first reaction was disbelief. But as the details unfolded, his skepticism gave way to scientific curiosity. "Dad," James said after a long silence, "what you're describing shouldn't be possible. Bears don't bond with domestic animals, and they definitely don't choose captivity over the wild when they're healthy enough to leave. If this is really happening the way you say, it could be a major breakthrough in our understanding of animal psychology." Within 48 hours, James had reached out to colleagues at the Montana Wildlife Conservation Center and the University of Montana's Department of Wildlife Biology. The consensus among experts was clear. Sam's experience represented a rare and valuable opportunity to study interspecies bonding and unconventional rehabilitation methods. More importantly, they were willing to collaborate with state officials to create a special research permit that would allow Willow to remain on the farm under close observation. The negotiations were complex, involving multiple agencies and layers of documentation Sam never expected to deal with, but interest from the scientific community, combined with James's professional reputation and Sam's military service, eventually led to a groundbreaking agreement. Willow could stay on the farm as part of a long-term study in human-animal bonding, provided she underwent regular vet checkups, behavioral assessments, and followed strict safety protocols. Initially skeptical, Wade Conley became an unlikely ally. Seeing firsthand the relationship between Duke, Willow, and Sam shifted his perspective. His reports to superiors emphasized the case's uniqueness and its potential scientific value. Spring brought new challenges and revelations as Willow continued to grow. Nearing her first birthday, she had gained significant weight, but was still smaller than other wild bears her age, likely a result of early malnutrition. Yet her behavior remained the most surprising element of all. Unlike wild bears that tend to grow more solitary, Willow showed no desire to separate from her chosen family. Her participation in Duke's patrols became increasingly sophisticated, her sharp senses a perfect complement to his experience. Even the sheep, once nervous around her, had adjusted. To them, she was just another guardian, no more threatening than Duke. That summer, Sam's 7-year-old granddaughter Emily came to visit. The daughter of Sam's other son, Michael, Emily had heard tales of Willow for months. Her arrival posed the ultimate test. How would a bear once traumatized by humans react to a small child? The introduction was carefully controlled. Several adults were present and emergency protocols stood by. But Emily, fearless in her curiosity, approached Willow holding wild berries and a weathered stuffed bear. Willow accepted both, the berries with calm and the toy with gentle curiosity, carrying it in her mouth as she followed Duke on his evening rounds. The image of a bear cub walking the pasture with a child's toy became an emblem of that summer. It was captured in photos that would later accompany scientific papers detailing Willow's remarkable case. For Sam, the sight of his granddaughter playing peacefully beside an animal that once would have been considered a threat was deeply moving. It signaled a kind of healing he hadn't known was possible. But peace gave way to sorrow in the third year of Willow's stay. Duke, now 15, began to show the signs of age and strain from a lifetime of vigilance. He moved more slowly, rested longer, though his sense of duty never waned. Sam and Willow adjusted their routines, making space for his limitations without ever letting him feel forgotten. On Duke's final day, he completed one last patrol with Sam and Willow. That night, he passed quietly in his sleep, curled beside the barn door, the place where so many chapters of their shared story had begun. The next morning, Sam found him. He knew immediately that an era had ended. Willow's response was heartbreakingly human. She approached Duke's body, sniffed, gently then sat back and let out 3 long, mournful howls that echoed through the valley. She refused food that day, stayed by Duke's side, and watched silently as Sam, Emily, James, and a small group of researchers gathered to bury him beneath an ancient oak overlooking the pasture. When the last mound of earth had been smoothed into place, Willow lay down beside it and kept vigil through the night. In the months that followed, Willow quietly took over Duke's responsibilities. Her patrols became methodical and thorough, her protection of the sheep unflinching. But she also adopted a new ritual. Every morning, she climbed a hill and stood silently, gazing toward the sunrise, as if keeping the watch that Duke no longer could. Her story inspired growing interest from the scientific community. Papers were published, conferences held, and her case sparked fresh conversations about rehabilitation and coexistence. The rigid divide between wild and domestic was no longer so absolute. Under the right conditions, mutual respect and shared purpose could bridge even the most unlikely divides. For Sam, now approaching 70, Willow represented something far more personal. She was a symbol of resilience, of what it meant to heal after loss. She had shown that family could be chosen, not inherited, that bonds formed through empathy could be just as strong, perhaps stronger than those forged by blood. Each evening, Sam sat on his porch, watching her circle the flock as the sun slipped behind the mountains. In the golden quiet, he often thought back on how it all began. An injured bear cub, a loyal old dog, and a widowed man finding purpose in the unexpected. The farm was no longer silent. It pulsed with life and memory, with the rhythm of beings who had chosen each other in defiance of expectation. In the vast, wild stretch of Montana, where sky met earth in endless conversation, 3 unlikely souls had proven that the most powerful force in nature was not survival, but care. Willow wasn't a pet, she was family, not tamed but home. And in her presence, Sam learned that the most meaningful victories are not won in war or law, but in the quiet triumph of love over fear, compassion over division, and unity over all that seeks to separate. The tale of the guardian of Elk Ridge endures, not just in research or record, but in the hearts of those brave enough to believe that sometimes the heart knows better than the world ever could.